Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide, and my name is Chef Andy. I'm going to be your host today, and I'm going to be taking you through a beautiful journey of how to make your own chocolate brownies at home. So I'm just going to first of all start by introducing the ingredients in front of us today. I've got a beautiful bowl here with a bit of vanilla essence. I've got some unsalted butter, a pinch of salt, a bit of all-purpose flour, 2 eggs there. I've got some chopped dark chocolate. I've got some cocoa powder as well, some regular white sugar, and just a bit of milk. So I'm going to give you this opportunity to now grab your pens and papers, and when you come back, I'm going to show you how to turn these beautiful ingredients into a beautiful bliss. See you after the short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those who missed out on the introductory bit of the show, we are going to be making chocolate brownies today, one of my most loved pastry dishes, and I'm going to show you how to do it right on this very stage. So without further ado, we're going to start with the most crucial part of the dish, which is basically turning this beautiful chopped chocolate into ganache. So for that, I'm going to be reheating some water here. I've got a pot of just regular water, and from the size of the pot, I only used 1 cup of water. Remember, all I need is a bit of steam to just melt the chocolate, and that basically is just going to help me melt everything. So I'm just going to pour that into the bowl, and we're just going to give that a few seconds to heat up. In the meantime, we're going to split our eggs. Just going to crack those into this big beautiful bowl here. Alright, so one thing to remember about a chocolate brownie, there's so many variations to this particular pastry dish. There's plenty recipes out there. You can just go out and check out online. You do have brownies that come with nuts, some without nuts, some with fruit, some without fruit. This particular recipe is the most standard and basic one. So if you are going to be thinking of incorporating your own technique, this is basically a good place to start. As I always mention on the show, a lot of the recipes we're using, it's not that they are standard and they are fixed and they cannot be changed. This is just a demo. This is a basic just to be able to lead you into understanding how to make the particular dish. So now my pot of water is now steaming. Though I brought the water to the boil first of all, and I'm just going to bring my temperature down. And all I want to do now is have the water simmering. And basically simmering would be basically having it just bubbling and not boiling. And basically this is just to ensure that I don't burn my chocolate or I don't melt it too fast. So now that it's nice to go, I'm just going to set my beautiful bowl on top. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, I'm working with a ceramic glass bowl. If you don't have the access to one of these, you can alternatively use a stainless steel bowl. It'll still give you the same. It'll still do the same job. So I'm just going to use a spoon, and I'm just going to mix that chocolate around. Remember, one thing about chocolate is you can't just melt it by letting the bowl heat up. It is crucial to continue mixing it continuously, and this is just to make sure that your chocolate does not burn. So I'm just going to mix that as I go. And basically what you're looking for is a runny mixture. So this is basically the stage we call tempering your chocolate. And crucial things to remember, particularly with this, if you do buy chocolate that's not standard, if it's not 70%, it might not be able to do the same job. So there is a lot of chocolate in the market, and there is a lot of chocolate that is not particularly right for this particular process. But I insist, when you do go out to your outlets out there, do pick the best chocolate that you can cook with. Remember, if you're going to be making pastry, you don't want to compromise your dish on using something substandard. So one particular way to make sure you get your pastries right, always buy the best ingredients. Right. So I'm just going to continue mixing this, and it's now just about done. So this normally takes between 2 and 4 minutes, depending on how much chocolate you have in your bowl. But one particular thing to remember is it is a little harder to melt lumps of chocolate when they're in big sizes. So I recommend, if you're not going to think of chopping up your chocolate, at least grate it. It will save you the time, it will save you gas, and it will actually be a little easier to melt your chocolate. So our ganache is just about ready now. Just going to continue mixing that. So remember, you're basically melting down the chocolate, breaking down those chunks of chocolate, and basically by the time you have your chocolate totally melted down, you should actually be able to not see any particular chunks of chocolate in your bowl. So I'm just going to continue mixing that, and I'm now going to turn my heat off. Remember, as soon as you get to a stage where your chocolate has just started to turn into a ganache, turn your heat off. You can leave your bowl on top of your saucepan. It will still continue holding shape. All right, so very, very simple technique. So ladies and gentlemen, this is basically just the basic way of melting your chocolate ganache. And as I always like to show the viewers at home, if you can be able to lift your spoon and you can be able to just watch the chocolate roll out of your spoon, that means you're basically done, and you should be able to turn off the heat at this stage. Although I always leave my bowl on top of the saucepan just to make sure my chocolate doesn't go back to its solid state and it stays as a ganache. Right, so the next process would be making our brownie mixture. So I'll start by cracking 2 eggs into this big beautiful bowl, and to that I will be incorporating a bit of vanilla essence, a bit of sugar, and we'll also be going in with the dry ingredients. But as I always insist, always have an extra bowl on the side. Make sure to always take some time to actually sift through your ingredients. This is just to make sure that you don't have any impurities in your flour. So I'm just going to pour my cocoa powder and my all-purpose flour in there, and I'm just going to use my sieve to work through that. So something also to pay attention to, a lot of times when you actually use cocoa powder, you might actually find that you will get the lumps as they are inside there. Remember, this is actually the reason why I'm using a sieve. It's always to make sure that you always watch out for these lumps. And it's a very easy process once you get there, because at least you already know to this extent that your mixture is clean. All you can do now is just use a regular spoon and press the cocoa powder, press the cocoa right through the sieve, and as you can see, the sieve comes out clean and you're ready to go. Okay, so I'll just bring your attention back to this side, but before that, I do have about 100 grams of butter here. Remember, you can't really whisk in butter that's solid, so you do have to melt this in a microwave, or you can melt it in a hot pan as well. So I'm just going to leave that in there for about, let's say about 20 seconds, and we check back on it. Right, so to the bowl I'm going to be adding a bit of vanilla essence. And we're just going to give that a quick whisk. Right, and right after that, I'm just going to whisk in my sugar little by little. Remember not to add too much at once, because you might actually end up with lumps. So I always insist, if you can be able just whisk in a tablespoon at a time, it's always the safest way to go, and it actually gives your sugar enough time to incorporate with your mixture. Right, so Whisking it right through to the end. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is also one very crucial stage, because this is basically mixing a liquid and a solid, and it is crucial that you do take your time to mix it in well, because you can't really break those sugar granules until you really whisk it well. So I always insist, take a bit of time in this stage making your sabayon. Take a bit of time to just mix it completely. And one particular reason I'm using a glass bowl is I can actually be able to see through the side, and I can be able to see the granules. So looking at it now, I can just be able to run my finger right across, and I can still find a bit of granule, so you know it's not done yet. But just to make that a little more easier, this is basically why you have to melt your butter, and this actually, a bit of warm melted butter will actually help you dissolve that extra sugar granule in there. So I'm just going to mix that in slowly. So at this stage, your mixture is just starting to thicken. But remember, as I mentioned when we started, always start with your wet ingredients and finish with your dry ingredients. You always get a beautiful consistency at the end. Right, so I'm just going to lift that off the saucepan. So as I said, as you can see, the chocolate is still nice and runny, still melted. So we don't really need to reheat that again. Just be sure to not waste all your chocolate. Just give your spoon a bit of a shake before you take it out of your bowl, just to make sure you don't waste it. Remember, chocolate is also a costly product. Right, so I'm just going to add my egg mixture in there now. And always be sure to just use your whisk. Just continue working your whisk right around your bowl. That will actually allow the mixture to come out a little faster. Simple as that. Right, so we're now going to mix our ganache with our eggs and our sugar and our vanilla. And I'm just going to work mixing the bowl continuously. Remember, particularly with brownies, remember you're working with chocolate, you really want to pay attention to it. Remember, chocolate is not the easiest and cheapest product in the market. And if you're going to be spending your money buying 70 to 75% pure chocolate, you do want to take a bit of precaution when making something with it. So as you can see, the mixture is now a little thicker. Just going to work around my bowl. And be sure to always scrape any excess on the sides. Just always try and work that back into the bowl. Right, and now last but not least, in the bowl here I have some flour, some all-purpose flour and some cocoa powder that we sieved a little earlier. And this I'm just going to add in small amounts. As I said, never be in a hurry to add all your dry ingredients at once. Remember, your liquid does need a bit of incorporating, so always do it in small stages. Right, so I'm just going to go about 2 tablespoons at a time. And as you continue, your mixture will continue thickening, so you should actually be able to start getting that beautiful, rich, cakey mixture at this stage. And remember, this is among your last stages of mixing your cake. By this stage, you should actually be paying more attention to your oven you're just about to use. Now, my oven has been preheating for a few minutes now. It's set up at about 180 degrees, as you can see. And now, basically, now all you need to do is finish your mixture, move it into your baking dish, and you are ready to go. Right, so my mixture is almost all incorporated. Always insist, give your bowl a bit of a tap just to make sure everything is out of there, or use a spoon as well. Remember, as I mentioned earlier while we started making the dish, pastry is all about precision, so you don't really want to waste anything in there. Remember, the slightest amount of alteration to your recipe could either result in a very, very disastrous product, or it might actually not even turn out as you expected. So it is very crucial to follow your recipe all the way to the end. So I'm just going to work my whisk around, and what I do is I work from the outside in. And you will notice that the mixture will start to turn into a mud-like consistency. And that is why I always reserve just a little bit of milk. So I have about a third of a cup of milk. This is just basically to help me get through mixing this. So you will notice it's a little thick and it might not even fall off your whisk, and that is not what you're looking for. So I'm just going to add about a tablespoon of milk. So remember, this is just to help you incorporate your ingredients. Remember, you're not really trying to look for a runny mixture, but you're trying to look for a consistent mixture and one that is mixed right through to the smallest lumps that are in your mixture. I'm just going to keep mixing that. And as I said, for cake mixtures particularly, or anything to do with brownies, you definitely need to be able to see your mixture fall off your whisk or your mixing spoon before it goes into the oven. Remember, those are just particular checkpoints to make sure that the consistency is right, the moisture is going to be right, and it's not going to come out dry and totally, it doesn't come out dry and it doesn't come out uncooked. All right. So as you can see now, the mixture is now starting to run off my whisk, and once you get to this stage, you don't want to add any more liquid in there. Your mixture is now ready to go. Right, so for that I had reserved some beautiful bowls here that I'm going to be using to bake, but I will show you a particular technique, and this is just to make sure that whenever you put your mixture, especially if you're going to be baking with ramekins this size, remember, you want to be very, very particular to make sure that, first of all, the bowls that you're using are oven proof. You don't want to put your mixture in there and have your bowl cracking while it's still cooking. So always make sure when you buy your bowls, do read the label, do read the box that it comes in. Make sure it actually says oven proof, which means you can actually use it to bake. If you're not sure about it, I always recommend you can always alternatively look for a bowl that size that is actually guaranteed to go into the oven without breaking. Right, so I'll start off firstly by transferring my mixture. I'm just going to use a spoon to get that mixture in there. And then one particular thing to remember, always pour your mixture right in the middle. Remember, this allows your mixture to spread out evenly. So always just hold your bowl right in the center of, on top of the bowl that you're going to be baking in, and just hold it right in the middle and let your mixture just work its way in. And something you want to also pay attention to, never fill your bowl all the way to the top. Remember, this is going to cook. It is going to rise a little bit. You want to give it that extra room to actually come all the way up. Right, and I'm just going to do the same with the second bowl. And as I said, always just aim for the center and let the mixture do the rest. So as I said, this is a particularly very, very crucial stage, especially when you're making cake. Remember, if your mixture can't easily pour out of the bowl, first thing you're definitely sure of is getting a very dry product. And chances are there is not going to be any moisture in there, which means you're probably not going to enjoy what you made. So I'm just going to spoon in just a little bit more. Remember, what we're looking for is just about 3/4 to the height of the bowl. Set that aside. So you're looking for just about 3/4 level to the bowl that you're using. If it's a bigger container as such, you can go slightly to the top because this actually has a little more room to rise. But if it's a smaller container, I always insist, don't fill it all the way to the top because your mixture will actually pour over. Right, so now I am going to show you a particular technique of baking. This particular baking technique always ensures that your bowl is safe. It also ensures that your mixture cooks evenly and it doesn't actually damage your container. So all I'm going to do is transfer the ramekins into this beautiful baking dish, and I'm just going to add water right at the bottom of it. So the technique itself is called the double boiling technique. So basically, the idea came from a particular chef who actually tried to bake something and realized that the containers would probably crack or brown at the top. And what happened is he decided to actually put a bit of water in the container, and what happens is your container doesn't really heat up, but the mixture will cook on the inside, which means your ramekin is actually limited from cracking, and you actually eliminate any chances of losing your beautiful ramekins, and you can be able to use them much later on. So this is now ready to bake. Remember, the oven is set at 180 degrees. I'm just going to set my timer for about 15 to 20 minutes, but we will continue checking as it cooks. And all we are going to do is move that straight into the oven. Remember, you want to always put that right in the middle. You always get a beautiful supply of hot air right in the center. Remember, I'm using an element, so this doesn't have a fan, so it's very particular that I have a bit of water in there just to make sure it doesn't get too hot. So we're going to take a small commercial break. I'm going to clean up my beautiful mess here, and when we come back, I'm going to pull them out. We're going to see what they look like, and I'm just going to show you how to present them. Don't touch that dial. With us before the break, and if you're just joining us, we were actually working on a beautiful chocolate dish today. We were making a chocolate brownie. It's now been cooking for about 16 to 18 minutes in the oven, and we're just about to take it out. So we're going to take it out slowly. Remember to be careful when you pull this out of the oven, because you're using the double boiler and you could spill the water on yourself, so be very cautious about it. Right, very, very simple. And all I'm going to do now is just use my tongs to get this ball out of there. Right. Right, ladies and gentlemen, as you can be able to see now, we have very, very, very beautiful looking brownies, and I will show you a particular technique of always making sure your pastries are cooked through. Always just use a knife and just drop it right into the middle and just lift it slowly. And as you can see, particularly for a chocolate brownie, it should be just a little bit moist but not too watery. Remember, it's a moist cake, so you don't want it to be too dry. And actually, just by looking at the knife, normally we call them legs. You basically look at the strands that come out with the knife, and that should be able to tell you that it is actually moist enough or it's actually uncooked. So what happens is, if you insert your knife and you pull it out and it's totally covered in chocolate, then you know it's still molten on the inside and you know it's not cooked yet. But if you can be able to touch it and it's a little sticky and it dries out really quickly afterwards, that is a very, very good sign of a very beautifully done chocolate brownie. So I'm just going to set that in front there, and you all can have a beautiful glimpse at that. All right, so as I said, ladies and gentlemen, something very simple, something you can now be able to do yourselves at home. As I said, the recipe has had a lot of alterations in the years before, and there's a lot of different recipes out there. The one that we were using today is the basic, simple one. Any alterations or any modifications you can make to that, you can be able to look online. I would particularly maybe add a bit of cashew nuts to it, and maybe just a drizzle of chocolate on top when it's cooled off, and I'll just serve it immediately. So it has been a pleasure being with you today. It has been a pleasure showing you how to make a chocolate brownie from home, and now you can all be able to do it yourselves. It's a very 1, 2, 3 easy step. From the studios and myself, it has been a pleasure. You have been tuned into Dinner Guide. My name is Chef Andy, and I've been your host today. So until the next show, have a lovely evening.